Good afternoon. I am Ken Wallach. I'm president of NDI, and I wanted to welcome everyone to the Madeleine K. Albright Grant Luncheon. We have gathered here to recognize great strides women have made in the political arena and to honor a group that has made an unprecedented effort to advance women's political leadership in a country that has been in the vanguard of democratic change in Central Asia. That is the celebratory side of this gathering. But there is a different side as well, and that is the hard reality that the struggle for broader engagement of women in politics at all levels and everywhere goes on against tremendous odds. Since 1984, NDI has worked in more than 100 countries to increase the number and effectiveness of women in political life, in the belief that as more women become politically involved, institutions will become more responsive to the needs of all citizens. The annual Madeleine K. Albright Grant honors organizations that have created a greater role for women in political life. The $25,000 grant is part of a larger global campaign, the Win with Women Global Initiative, which was launched in 2003 under the leadership of Madeleine Albright. The initiative is designed to promote the kind of reform of political parties and institutions that will provide real avenues for women's political leadership. In this effort, NDI has worked with 13,000 civic organizations, 720 political parties, 10,000 legislators, and 1,300 women's organizations. Madeleine Albright was the Institute's founding vice chair 27 years ago. She left briefly for a couple of obscure government posts and returned as chairman in 2001. Her leadership has expanded the reach and enhanced the standing of NDI in so many ways. Now, there are a number of other individuals and groups whom I want to acknowledge today. I want to first recognize our board of directors, whose leadership, commitment, and generosity are central to the Institute's efforts. In particular, I would like to ask those board members who are here to stand today so that we can show our appreciation. Hattie Babbitt, Elizabeth Bagley, Joan Kalambokidis, Shirley Robinson Hall, Rochelle Horowitz, Molly Razor, Nancy Rubin, Elaine Shokus, and Rusty Connor, NDI's counsel. I wanted to single out Bren Simon, who is not here today, but who supports the Albright Grant each year. I also want to acknowledge the members of Congress and the staffs who are here, and we are particularly honored to have Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney and Sheila Jackson Lee with us. And we are privileged to hear from Congresswoman W. Wasserman Schultz later in the program. With us today are also board members and staff of the National Endowment for Democracy and our three affiliated institutes, IRI, the Solidarity Center, and CIPE. And we are all proud members of the endowment family. We are pleased that officials from the White House, State Department, the Millennium Corporation, and USAID are with us. They represent our support network and our partners in the field in so many places. And I would also like to recognize NDI Vice President Sherry Bryan, who not only manages the day-to-day operations of the Institute, but also organizes events like these. I know of no other organization that has sustained grassroots programs for women in as many countries as has NDI. However, we recognize that we are not alone in this effort. We are only part of a global network of partners, governments, intergovernmental organizations, and other non-governmental groups, all of whom share this mission. And I want to thank our friends and partners from the community of organizations that dedicate their time to advance women politically, economically, and socially. Among them are those listed in the program who supported this event: the Institute for Inclusive Security, the Gender Program at the Elliott School of International Affairs, the United Nations Association, Women in International Security, the Women's Foreign Policy Group, the Council of Women World Leaders, the Futures Without Violence, and the UNDP. At its heart, NDI is a public-private partnership, so I especially want to single out those who made this event possible: the corporations, trade unions, foundations, and individual donors. Each of them is listed in the program and on the screen and gratefully acknowledged. And I also want to welcome the Diplomatic Corps, and I would like to express our gratitude to those in this room and hundreds of others around the globe who volunteer their time to assist NDI's efforts. And in addition to the Andy Parhamovich Fellow, who you will hear more about later, there are also 14 women from Kosovo, in this room, from politics, from media, from civil society, and from government, who are here on a Hope Fellowship. Now, earlier today, we heard a panel of experts discuss the different strategies women can employ to successfully gain more ground within political parties and parliaments. And I would like to thank those who participated in this important discussion. They include Secretary Albright, Winnie B. Amina, head of the gender team at United Nations Development Program, Don Steinberg, the Assistant Administrator of USAID, and Anders Johnson, Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union. I would now like to introduce a woman who is well known to all of us as a tireless champion of women's economic and political rights worldwide. When Ambassador Madeleine is not on the ground, engaging and inspiring women in some of the most remote places on earth, she is on a plane en route to one of those places, or on a return flight, preparing once again to advocate for and lead women's global initiatives by the U.S. government. She was a founder of Vital Voices and served as its first chair. And then, in another first, she became the ambassador at large for global women's issues at the Department of State. It is my honor to present Ambassador Madeleine Verveer.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Ken. And he just explained why I never get to see any of you. I think it's great that NDI has created this family reunion today so that we can all come together. And this is such a special part of NDI, one very near and dear to my heart, what NDI is doing for giving women the opportunity that they deserve, and certainly the lift up in accessing political power. I want to thank Ken and everybody associated with NDI for the work that goes on every day to support the democracy builders around the world. And we have been reminded in recent weeks just how difficult that mission is, and NDI is unsurpassed. So thanks to all of you who make this exceptional work possible. And it is, of course, my very great honor to be here with that true global trailblazer, Madeleine Albright. I count her as a treasured friend and one with whom I had the great fortune to work in the Clinton administration. You know, it's easy to forget just how long ago the idea of Madam Secretary seemed so far-fetched. Of course, that is no longer the case, and I've been told, and I believe it's probably true because children can be so blasé, that Madeleine's granddaughter wondered what was the big deal that her grandmother was the top diplomat. And she apparently said, after all, only girls can be Secretary of State. So we'll have to talk to her sometime about just how hard it is for women still to enter the ranks of ministers and how tough it is for women to hold elective office. It's just about the toughest part of women's rise to full gender equality. Women are half the world's population, yet hold less than 1/5 of the positions in national governments. They are still significantly outnumbered in the chambers of parliaments and provincial councils, and they are certainly more often than not missing from the negotiating tables where conflicts are to be resolved. All too often, important decisions that affect women, their families, and their societies are made without their having a voice in the deliberations. And we know that when women are discriminated against in the political arena, their experiences, talents, and perspectives are shut out of policy decisions, and our democracies are worse off for it, and the prospects for a better world are certainly shortchanged. So that is one of the reasons I am such a huge fan of NDI's Win with Women Global Initiative, which promotes women's political leadership around the world, which I have had the great fortune to work with closely in this position, and one to which Madeleine has brought such incredible validation to its work. And I want to salute Susan Markham for the great job that she is doing at the helm of Win for Women. Now, 2011 began with women helping to lead the revolutions of the so-called Arab Spring, and it ended with the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to 3 extraordinary women from Liberia and Yemen who have advanced human rights, peace, and democracy, and have shown what a difference women can make, even in bringing terrible conflicts to a close or rallying for democracy in a significant way. Now, it still remains to be seen what the prospects are going to be for women in Egypt, in Libya, in Tunisia, in Yemen. And I must admit that some of the signs have been quite troubling for women's progress. But to ensure that the perspectives and considerations of women are woven into the approach of our own government to confronting critical challenges in areas of conflict and significant political transitions, from Afghanistan to Sudan, from Libya to Nepal. As you know, President Obama launched the first ever U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. And it took us a while. We have about 30-some countries who preceded us. NATO also got their action plan done, and we finally joined the ranks, and I know it will make a difference. Because a lot of the countries that have already adopted national action plans are saying, we'd like to come and see how we can improve our own plans. So it's good to be admitted to those ranks. And what it does is it sets out a roadmap for how we will accelerate and institutionalize efforts across government to advance women's participation in preventing conflict and keeping the peace. That is our common cause, and that's why I'm thrilled that NDI is playing a leadership role in advancing women's political participation in all of the arenas. And one way that is happening is why we are gathered here at lunch today, and that is the Madeleine K. Albright Grant, which supports community-based organizations that create greater roles for women in political and civic life. The winners are selected from a very competitive pool of applicants, and this year, the Kyrgyzstan Women's Discussion Group has come out on top. Kyrgyzstan has made tremendous strides in democracy with the establishment of the first parliamentary republic and the first peaceful democratic presidential transition that has taken place there. I was in Bishkek just before the election, several months ago, for a conference that the State Department sponsored for women entrepreneurs from throughout Central Asia. And I remember the meeting with President Atunbayeva, who was involved in this peaceful transference of power. And she is such a dynamic leader and wants to stay engaged in significant ways to keep her country on that democratic road. But she reminded me in an earlier visit that there was a time, and this is true, several years ago, I hardly remembered it, when she was part of a group I was involved in on women's political participation, to share best practices, to share skills, to work together. And she told me, now the president of her country, she said, I remember what a difference it made in my life and in my career. So that is why this project that NDI engages in every day is so vitally critical. And the Women's Discussion Club was one of the first groups in Kyrgyzstan to bring together women from diverse backgrounds and political parties to defend the rights and interests of women nationwide, and that is not an easy thing to do. The club worked to establish a 30% gender quota in the Electoral Code, resulting in 24 female members of the parliament in 2007, and making Kyrgyzstan a leader in women's political representation in the region. And in 2010, the club was instrumental in supporting women candidates for parliament and organized citizens around key issues. We are shortly going to see a brief film of just what the Discussion Club does and why its work is so important, and why it is getting the grants so it can do even more. And it intends to use its prize money to grow the coalitions and to advocate even more effectively on behalf of women in Kyrgyzstan. And I was able, just before coming in here today, to talk to the leader of the Discussion Club, and I asked her what this means to her. And it's true, whenever groups like this can be validated, we underestimate what it represents. The kind of inspiration the club will have growing as it does from this award, and the kind of validation that it represents, that it has achieved this level of recognition, will serve it no end when it continues the hard work it's doing. They told me that they want to reform the parliamentary election law because today, when a woman steps down, she's immediately replaced by a man. And they would like to see a woman stepping down being replaced by a woman in a way that is fairer. And to expand the coalition to ensure that the wings of all of the political parties throughout the country, the women's wings, can work more closely together on issues that matter to women and to the population more broadly. So please look now to the film, and then you will hear from the wonderful leader of the Kyrgyzstan Women's Discussion Club. Thank you all.
Located along the old Silk Road in Central Asia, among the soaring Celestial Mountains, the small, remote country of Kyrgyzstan has always been a land of change. In recent years, it has surprised the world by making tremendous democratic strides that far outpace its neighbors. Since independence from the Soviet Union, Kyrgyzstan has made 3 separate forays toward democratization. The first 2 under Presidents Askar Akayev and Kurmanbek Bakiyev ended in disappointment. The third experience, beginning with the violent revolution in 2010, resulted in the establishment of the first parliamentary republic and the first peaceful democratic presidential transition in Central Asia under the leadership of Rosa Otunbayeva. These remarkable achievements put Kyrgyzstan in a strong position to continue its democratic progress. Women have been crucial to each of Kyrgyzstan's democratic advances. In this beautiful place, the strength of women is visible in the vibrant colors and sturdy warmth found in the national symbol and traditional nomadic home, or yurt. But even the hospitality of Kyrgyz women is surpassed by their economic, social, and political impact. In 2005, the Tulip Revolution offered the first glimpse of democratic hope since independence, and women rose to the occasion.
I think that our club's establishment was much needed and timely, because women in Kyrgyzstan comprise 54% of the electorate, and we believe that women should play a significant role in the building of the democratic society.
The Women's Discussion Club formed shortly after the Tulip Revolution. At the time, as the first organization to bring women together from diverse backgrounds and political parties to defend the rights and interests of women, the club was considered a breakthrough in the country's developing democracy.
The Women's Discussion Club, in a neutral and nonpartisan way, was able to bring up issues that other organizations wouldn't or couldn't because of repression in the country. And I think that the club experienced less repression, partly because it was neutral and nonpartisan, and partly because, I think, it was women.
Over time, the club realized that it wasn't enough just to discuss political issues. They had to get directly engaged. In one of their most significant achievements, the club helped establish a 30% gender quota in the electoral code, resulting in 24 female members of parliament being elected in 2007 and making the country a leader in the region for women's political representation. Unfortunately, the Tulip Revolution failed to bring the democratic change many had hoped for. When President Bakiyev's rule came to a violent end in April 2010, in protests that claimed over 80 lives, women again stepped up to play a key role in a new political order. Rosa Otunbayeva, a friend to the Women's Discussion Club and an ally for women in politics, was appointed interim president to bridge the political divides between her male colleagues.
I do believe that women in my country over this transition time have been very active. As the first women president in Kyrgyzstan and in Central Asia, I was supported and I was inspired by the women's movement in Kyrgyzstan.
Under President Otunbayeva, Kyrgyzstan made tremendous progress on democratic reforms, including constitutional amendments that limit the power of the presidency in favor of a stronger parliament. During parliamentary elections in 2010, the Women's Discussion Club played a prominent role in preparing women to run for office, and several of its members were elected as a result.
Some of the members of our club became members of the parliament, representing various political parties who actively bring forward acute women issues in the parliament. We need to prepare women in every aspect, get them ready for politics, prepare them for the executive power, and even prepare women to be the president.
As stability begins to replace constant political change in Kyrgyzstan, the Women's Discussion Club will continue its work. Women will only achieve their maximum strength when they work together, so the club will continue to build strong relationships between women in parties, parliament, and government office, and in turn develop a stronger Kyrgyzstan. Women have been crucial to each of Kyrgyzstan's democratic advances. As Kyrgyzstan heads into new, uncharted territory as a parliamentary republic, the Women's Discussion Club provides an invaluable national resource and an example for the rest of the region.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of the Kyrgyz Women's Discussion Club, Dinara Atkulova.
For Kyrgyzstan. Thank you. On behalf of the Women's Discussion Club in Kyrgyzstan, I would like to express my gratitude to NDI for awarding our organization the 2012 Madeleine Albright Grant. Out of all the talented and deserving groups around the world that work on behalf of women, we are honored that our work to promote women's rights and increase women's political participation in Kyrgyzstan would be noted by Secretary Albright and by the National Democratic Institute. Kyrgyzstan has overcome incredible challenges to get where it is today, including 2 revolutions, ethnic conflict, and authoritarian regimes. Our country is fortunate to have had strong women to help lead it through these difficult times. Our former president, Rosa Otunbayeva, showed us the unique and powerful role women can play in resolving conflict and promoting democratic transition under difficult circumstances. Her exceptional leadership propelled Kyrgyzstan from authoritarian rule towards becoming the first parliamentary democracy in Central Asia. The Women's Discussion Club emerged in 2006 when mothers, wives, and sisters realized that had an invaluable role to play in the building of a democratic and fair Kyrgyz society. For example, there were no women in parliament when male parliamentarians attempted to legalize polygamy. Women across Kyrgyzstan understood that staying out of this discussion and outside of politics was impossible, and that our voices needed to be included in such debates and in all decision-making. Our club helped educate women and men that such legislation was unacceptable, and we were able to defeat it. Following on that success, the Discussion Club helped to pass a 30% quota for women in parliamentary elections. The quota was successfully implemented in both the 2007 and 2010 elections, leading to a number of our club's members winning parliamentary seats. You just saw one of them in the video about our group. As 4 of 26 women in parliament, they have continued to promote our organization's mission to increase women's rights, as well as the rights and freedoms of all Kyrgyz citizens. Today, we are working hard to bring women together across political and geographical boundaries to defend the right of women in Kyrgyzstan to be actively engaged in the political process. The Madeleine Albright Grant will enable us to continue this critical effort. We will use the grant money for 2 activities. First, we will advocate for stronger quota laws that would increase the number of women in parliament and local government. And second, we will help to form a coalition of political party women's wings to advocate on behalf of women's rights within the legislature and their respective parties. We look forward to being able to report success in these efforts by this time next year. I would like to thank you on behalf of all of the members of the Women's Discussion Club and the women of Kyrgyzstan. We are deeply honored by your belief in the women of our country and your faith in the future success of Kyrgyzstan's democracy. With your consent, Dr. Albright, we would be deeply honored if you would agree to be an honorary member of our club. Thank you. Now you all see we have a new member of our club. Thank you.
Okay, Madeleine. I would just like to say a word about some former politicians who, as I said, have been important volunteers and supporters of NDI over the years. And they have been an indispensable resource to this institute. And I just want to recognize a few today. Herb Klein from New Jersey, who is a partner of this event. Jim Blanchard, Connie Morella, and Jane Harmon, who now heads, as you know, the Woodrow Wilson Center. So thank all of you. As you all know, Madeleine Albright has had many titles in her distinguished career: ambassador, professor, doctor, secretary, at home, either mom or Grandma Maddie, but to her NDI family, she is our chairman and our leader. And I am always honored to present my chairman, Madeleine Corbell Albright.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. What an amazing group of people, and your turnout in support of what I think is a fabulous organization, and for everything that we're doing, I'm very, very grateful. As you may know from reading about events in Egypt, this has been an extraordinarily long and interesting year at NDI, and it's only March. Excuse me, the silver lining in any time of stress is that it provides a true measure of leadership. And I can't tell you how really proud I am of NDI's leadership and Ken Wallach and Sherry Bryan and everything that NDI has done. I don't think we've ever proven Senator Robert Kennedy's point more clearly. If there's no one in your way, it's probably because you're not going anywhere. Well, NDI believes in movement toward freedom and towards human rights and towards the kind of democratic systems that we try to deliver. For more than a quarter of a century, we have acted on that belief, and this afternoon we really reaffirm our commitment. Earlier, in our years, we have honored we honored the discussion group from Kyrgyzstan, which I am truly delighted to be a part of, and is precisely the kind of innovative and grassroots organization that can help make real democracy possible, and I am very pleased to be a part of your group. I When I was in Bishkek, it was an interesting time, and it was wonderful more recently to get to know President Atambayeva, who has really been a huge leader. Elsewhere across the globe, more than 70 countries will be holding presidential or parliamentary elections this year. This is an amazing year. And among them are Burma, where the courageous Aung San Suu Kyi has re-entered the political process, and the Middle East, where a flock of newly empowered political parties will, in fact, be testing their wings. And as these and other transitions take place, the world will be watching to assess the degree of freedom, legality, and fairness with which decisions are made. And in one sense, every election will be unique in the same way that every democracy is unique. Yet some characteristics are essential to any democracy. And among these, as Milan Verveer so eloquently reminded us, is the active participation of women. And Milan, I want to thank you for everything that you do to make sure that this message gets transmitted. And as you have said, and as we all say and we repeat, we know when women have the power to make our own economic and social choices, the cycle of poverty can be broken, environmental awareness increases, the rates of sexually transmitted disease declines, and constructive values are more likely to be passed on to the young. And this explains why the empowerment of women has been a cornerstone of NDI programs and policy, and why we encourage people everywhere who are working to build platforms for future progress. So here with us today is one such person, Aphrodita Sila. Ms. Sila is a senior officer with NDI's program in the emerging democracy of Kosovo. For the next 3 months, she will be with us in Washington, using her time to consult with groups that can share lessons and otherwise assist in the pursuit of justice and deeper freedom in her native land. So I ask you to join with me in congratulating Ms. Sila for winning NDI's 2012 Andy Parhamovich Fellowship. Her selection comes after a very tough competition and speaks well of her commitment and skill. I also ask you to join in welcoming the family of the young woman for whom this fellowship was named. Andy Parhamovich was a courageous and deeply valued NDI staff member in Iraq who in 2007 was killed when militants assaulted a civilian convoy in which she was riding. Each year, we pay tribute to Andy's memory by continuing her work, and this year, once again, her parents and all kinds of relatives and beautiful granddaughters have honored us by their presence. Of course, we have another special guest with us as well. Every cause needs its champions, but it certainly helps if those champions are not only right on the issues, but also successful, charismatic, and smart. This afternoon, we have an opportunity to hear from precisely that kind of a champion. After more than a decade of service in her state legislature, Debbie Wasserman Schultz was elected in 2004 as a U.S. representative from Florida. In just a very short time, she has risen to positions of leadership within the Democratic Party. She is the first woman to be elected by the full membership of the DNC to serve as chair, and within Congress she has served as Chief Deputy Whip and Vice Chair of the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. Throughout her career, she has been dedicated to addressing such vital concerns as the creation of jobs, the protection of children, the fight against breast cancer, and the safety, security, and prosperity of our citizens. She is a living demonstration of why women's participation in government is vital, not just to people of one gender, but to us all. And it's wonderful to go and visit her office at the DNC, which is painted proud pink. So I am privileged to present to you the Honorable Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Secretary Albright. You're right, my office is, come by, my office is pale pink, bright pink. I wanted to make sure when I got to the DNC and saw these really big masculine brown couches that a strong signal was sent to anyone who crossed the threshold of my office that a woman works here now. So that's how I did it. It is an incredible honor to be here with all of you today, but to be introduced, I can hardly believe that I was just introduced by Secretary Madeleine Albright. I mean, truly a living legend, someone who I have admired for my whole career, longer than my whole career, from my time, even when I was in college and earlier than that. She is absolutely incredible, and this organization, NDI, is so fortunate to have her as their leader, and the world has been fortunate to have her leadership. Thank you also to Ken Pollack and all of the NDI staff who work tirelessly day in and day out to strengthen democracy worldwide. Now, a lot of us grow up dreaming about how to change the world, and NDI is really making it happen. Ambassador Verveer, where's the ambassador? There she is. I'm so sorry I missed your remarks, but it is so inspirational to have you here. Thank you for bringing strength and determination to all that you do. And you know, President Obama has made it a priority to appoint a lot of talented women, but I know that we are all especially grateful that he created the position of Ambassador for Global Women's Issues and selected you to fill this pivotal role. So thank you so much for your commitment as well. Along with Secretary, yes, applause are okay. Along with Secretary Clinton, you really are a testament to this administration's commitment to women worldwide, and so thank you so much for your service. And to the ladies of the Women's Discussion Club of Kyrgyzstan, your work is not only inspiring, but also living proof of what women can achieve when we work together. And I also want to acknowledge some of my colleagues who are here, Congresswoman and my roommate, Carolyn Maloney from the great state of New York, who I know is here. My colleague from Texas, they do everything big in Texas, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is here as well. And about a week and a half ago, I got the opportunity to, this job is really so amazing, at a women's policy dinner for celebrating Women's History Month and the number of women serving in Congress. I got to sit next to Ambassador Connie Morella, who is also a living legend and someone who really represents the civility that I hope we can get back to in the United States House of Representatives. And okay, all I'll be doing is acknowledging colleagues, but I see that Congresswoman Jane Harman, who was such a privilege to serve with, is here as well. Someone who I admire and respect so much. In the 11 months since President Obama nominated me to be chair of the Democratic National Committee, I've come to appreciate democracy in a whole new light. The United States brand of democracy is one in which anyone can make their voice heard and change our nation's discourse and even our nation's laws. But I feel that too often women don't speak up for fear of scrutiny or because of a lack of confidence or political efficacy or perceived dearth of resources. But women's voices are crucial to our democracy, and that's why I'm so proud to have recently launched the Democratic Women's Institute at the DNC. This institute provides a forum for women seeking to have their voices heard. Whether they're planning to run for office, serve as a campaign surrogate, or organize and mobilize in their own communities, the Democratic Women's Institute will be there for them with all of the resources, support, and information that they need. It was an incredible honor when President Obama called me last April and asked me to serve as chair of the DNC, because this president is one who understands the value of women's voices in government. A man of words and action, he's appointed women to serve as senior advisors in his administration, cabinet secretaries, and as Supreme Court justices. He created the White House Council on Women and Girls because he wanted to make sure that all government agencies take into account the needs of women and girls in the policies that they draft, the programs they create, and the legislation they support. Before the White House Council, there was one office, a White House Office on Women. For many of us, the feeling was, is that all we get? One office? So when President Obama took office, not only did he sign, the first bill that he signed into law was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, but he established the White House Council on Women and Girls so that we could make sure that across every agency, we were focusing on the priorities and needs of women and girls. And in doing so, we can ensure that in America, all things are still possible for all people. Now, I think many of you would agree with me. It is refreshing and reassuring to have a leader who cares about the value of women's input. In this country, as in Kyrgyzstan, women have been integral to the birth and edification of our democracy. Here in the U.S., we still speak of our founding fathers, but we would be remiss if we didn't give credit where it's due to the women who solidified our nation's foundation. Throughout our nation's history, from Abigail Adams to Susan B. Anthony to Madeleine Albright, the women who have come before us have spoken for the voiceless. They've taken on the fights that no one would. And they've worked tirelessly and unfailingly to ensure that the world that we leave to our children is one of more equality and more opportunity. The issues they championed are not confined to the history books. Still today, around the world, we see our sisters taking up these causes and winning. As riot and revolution have exploded across the Middle East and North Africa over the past year, women have been front and center in the movement to achieve democracy and freedom. If the voices of the Arab Spring have said anything to women here in America, it is that these ideals are enduring and universal. It is incumbent upon us to help them access the audience, the voice, and the tools that they need to realize their own potential. As you at NDI know all too well, it is never easy to provide these necessary tools to the leaders of a burgeoning democracy. When your own offices in Cairo were raided in December, and your staff was arrested and documents were confiscated, we were all reminded of the uphill battle we face to ensure Egypt fulfills the calls of last year's crowds in Tahrir Square. It is vital that these deplorable raids and investigations not deter us from our focus. We must be unflagging in our support for true Egyptian democracy. Women and minorities are the canaries in a coal mine of transitioning societies. If they are not protected and given the opportunity to thrive, we risk raising democracies in name only. That's why, despite the setbacks, we must continue on this path of strengthening and empowering women and would-be leaders of free nations across the region. Though their work is unfinished, we know that these women will never again be voiceless. Together, we will fight for the day when women everywhere can write their own destiny for themselves. Now, if there is anything that we know for sure, it is that we cannot succeed in a vacuum. A woman can be successful on her own, but her achievement is infinitely magnified when it is shared. We must invest in each other's success. Now, we know how Secretary Albright feels about this through her famous adage to women everywhere, "There is a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." I could not agree more. Now, I've certainly kept that in mind throughout my nearly 2 decades in public service, and it's why I'm proud to serve as vice chair of the Bipartisan Congressional Caucus for Women's Issues in the 112th Congress. In our entire country, oh, thank you. In our entire country's history, now listen, in our entire country's history, and the women members here know this statistic, only 277 women have ever served in Congress. How many men do you think have served? 12,000. 277 to 12,000. There is nothing I would like more than to seriously reduce that ratio. Are you with me? Now, in 1992, we had the Year of the Woman, when the number of women in Congress increased from 33 to 55. Yet nearly 2 decades later, we saw the number of women in Congress decline for only the second time in history after the 2010 midterm elections. Now, at this rate, we will not achieve parity in Congress for 500 years. I'm not exaggerating. That's how long it would take. And we all know that we need more women in Congress much sooner than 500 years. Because when women aren't serving in public office, we all lose out. We lose out on having unique viewpoints and life experiences that are represented at the policy table. Last summer, while members of Congress spent several weeks debating whether to raise our nation's debt ceiling, there were more than a few of us who felt that if it was left up to women, we would have gotten it all done in a weekend. And when President Rosa Otunbayeva, hooray, presided over the first peaceful transfer of power in the nation's history, it took planning, foresight, and humility to pull that off. In short, like the First Lady says, it took a woman. And now you know what they say. I've heard the First Lady say this before too. If you need something done, give it to a busy woman. But in order for us to succeed, well, really, look at our own lot. Look inside. You have only your own life to know that that's the case. In order for us to succeed, we have to remember that we reach our maximum effectiveness when we work together. And women know that uniquely. And that means that we're all responsible to extend a hand back and pull another woman up coming up behind us. Senator Barbara Mikulski of Maryland took matters into her own hands a few years ago as the first Democratic woman elected to the Senate in her own right, and now the longest-serving female member in the history of Congress. And she deserves those applause. She knew that it was up to her to help her fellow sisters of the Senate after they were elected in 1992. She organized a power training workshop to help them learn the ropes, noting, usually it's every man for himself, but I'm going to be every woman, each one teach one. It is that idea that we must carry forth for our future female leaders. We all know that one woman can make a difference, but women working together can change the world. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the media recently about women in this country. I don't know when women's private medical decisions became fodder for talk radio and the evening news, but I do know that the way women are talked about in this country must change. And part of the way that, thank you. And part of the way that we can do that is by harnessing our power and our voices through our vote. In exercising our constitutional right that generations of women before us literally fought for with blood, sweat, and tears, and their lives in some cases, we reclaim our right to not just be heard, but to effect change. In 2010, we saw a precipitous drop-off in the number of women voting, not just serving in office, but voting, from more than 60% of eligible women voting in 2008 to 46% in 2010. This year, I'm confident that we'll see that trend reversed. Women know what's at stake right now in this election. There's never been more at stake for women in any election in history in this country. But we have to make sure that every woman in America knows that there is just too much at stake to sit this one out. And even today, 228 days out from the election, we are already seeing women organizing in strong numbers. Women are talking to their friends, relatives, and neighbors. They're holding house parties and organizing rallies. They're writing checks and letters to the editor, and they're paying attention, and as well they should be. As our friends here from Kyrgyzstan know, there is nothing that can compete with a true grassroots movement. And no one embodies what grassroots stands for: community organizing, small acts of bravery, and endless dedication to a cause we believe in, like women. Now, it is really an incredible honor to be here in such inspiring company. I look around me and I see faces of women from all around the world, all countries, all backgrounds, all faiths, all ages, and yet it's so clear that what unites us is much more powerful than the superficial differences that divide us. In hearing from Dinara earlier, I know that we as women share the same desires. The desire for our children to grow up in a safe community with access to healthy food and a good education. The desire for our respective nations to work from within, to set aside political differences and work effectively. And the desire for all of our nations to work together to achieve peace and security. That's what women are in charge of in our families, making sure that everything is held together. So we have to celebrate the successes of women across the world, and we must work together to ensure that there are more successes to celebrate. The elements of success, clear leadership, determination, and commitment to hard work are universal. They're particularly universal for women. But we can all make a promise that we will help the next generation so that the barriers that we break down today are not just rebuilt and stood back up tomorrow. And our daughters and our granddaughters can go on to make history in ways like never before. Together, we can achieve this. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Congresswoman, thank you very, very much. Madam Chair. Milan, thank you for being with us. Madeleine, Dinara, thank you all for joining us this year. We hope you will all return for next year's Grant Luncheon. Thank you all. Get back to your office, your home, wherever you're going safely. Thank you for being with us. The Barhamoviches,